My name is Alyssa Harper, and the day my family abandoned me is etched into my memory like a scar that refuses to fade. I had just turned 18 a week before graduation, full of plans, full of nervous hope, thinking about leaving Missouri behind and chasing a life bigger than our cramped house and silent dinners. I never thought I'd be the one getting left behind, instead. That afternoon, I came home from my part-time shift at the gas station expecting the usual cold dinner and distant nod from my mom. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The house was hollow, not just quiet, but stripped bare. No couch, no photos, not even the faded rug my mom always hated. I stood frozen in the entryway, my heart thudding, wondering if I had walked into the wrong place. Then I saw it, a single envelope on the kitchen counter with my name on it. Inside was a note. No explanation. No. Goodbye. Just one sentence in my mother's perfect handwriting. We've done all we could. It's time for you to figure things out. I read it once, then again, my hands trembling as the meaning hit me. They were gone without warning, without a word. They had packed up their lives and left me behind. Like I was a mistake they didn't want to carry into their next chapter. I didn't cry, not right away. I just stood there staring at the empty spot where our family table used to be, where I had once sat trying to make conversation with people who barely looked up, and now they were gone. And I was alone, completely and utterly alone, with no money, no backup plan, and no idea what to do next. I was born and raised in a quiet corner of Missouri, the kind of place where everyone knows your parents' names and nobody asks if you're happy. I grew up in a small beige house with peeling siding and a lawn that never seemed to grow grass evenly. My mother was a stay-at-home kind of woman, not by choice but by bitterness, always complaining about missed chances and what could have been if she hadn't gotten pregnant so young. My father worked odd jobs, mechanic one month, drywall repair the next, always chasing work, never chasing us. And then there was my older sister Claire, 5 years ahead of me, blonde, sharp-tongued, and always perfect in my parents' eyes. I learned early that in our house, love was conditional, not something you received, but something you had to earn, and even when you tried your best, it was never quite enough. When I was 9, I made breakfast for my mom on Mother's Day pancakes from a mix, scrambled eggs from a YouTube tutorial I wasn't supposed to watch. I brought it to her in bed, proud and smiling, but she barely looked up from her phone and said the eggs were rubbery. When I was 14, I entered a regional essay contest and won 3rd place. My dad read the printed certificate, grunted, and asked why it wasn't first. I was always the quiet one, always watching, listening, trying to do everything right. I folded laundry without being asked, did the dishes. When Claire left them piled in the sink, gave up the remote. When Dad came in and sat down with that tired heaviness he wore like a coat, but nothing I did ever seemed to matter. Claire got the praise, the attention, the late-night whispered conversations with Mom when they thought I was asleep, and I got the leftovers, the eye rolls, the dismissals, the silence. I remember being 16 and working after school at a gas station off the main road. I saved every tip, every dollar, thinking I could finally buy a used laptop for school. But one evening, my dad sat down at the kitchen table and told me we were behind on the electric bill. I handed him all the money I had without a second thought. 2 weeks later, I asked if he'd paid the bill. He snapped and said I was being disrespectful, that I should be grateful to live under his roof. That moment stuck with me, not just the words, but the cold realization that in my family, sacrifice was expected but never appreciated. I started to pull back after that, not because I wanted to rebel, but because I was tired of trying to prove I was worth loving. School was my escape. Books were my refuge. I'd spend hours at the local library, not just studying, but hiding, listening to the quiet hum of air vents and the soft sound of pages turning, dreaming of a world where I didn't have to shrink myself just to survive. I kept my grades up, earned a partial scholarship to a state college, had a plan to move out by fall. I thought I was finally on the path to something better, something mine. I still hoped foolishly that maybe the day I walked across that graduation stage, they'd finally be proud, that maybe they'd see me, the real me. Not the version they kept trying to fix or forget. But all of that shattered the day I came home and found the house empty and the note, that cruel little note sitting like a final verdict on everything I had ever tried to be. They didn't even say goodbye, didn't even pretend to care, they just left. And in that moment, I realized I had never really belonged to them at all. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the back steps of the empty house with my knees pulled to my chest, staring at the gravel driveway, like maybe their car would roll back in headlights cutting through the dark. Maybe they'd changed their minds. Maybe this was all some cruel test. I waited until the sun came up, and when it did, the silence around me became unbearable. I walked back inside the walls, echoing my every step, and stood in what used to be the living room. There was nothing left. Not even a note with an address. Not even a scrap of my own childhood photos. Just empty floors and bare walls, and that voice in my head repeating over and over. They left me. They really left me. I opened every cupboard, every drawer, looking for some hint, some clue, but they were all empty, like I had never existed. My phone had no new messages, no missed calls, just the same text from Claire from the day before. "We had to go. You're strong enough now," I wanted to scream, to break something, but instead I packed a backpack with the little I had left, a change of clothes, my school papers, a charger, a toothbrush. Then I left the key on the counter and stepped out into the world with nowhere to go. I walked for hours that first day, aimlessly stopping at a gas station to buy a sandwich with my last $20. I sat on the curb outside, watching cars go by, wondering if anyone could see that I was officially homeless now. When night fell, I went to the back of a local Dollar Plus store I used to shop at with my mom. The alley behind it was narrow and smelled like cardboard and dust, but it was hidden and quiet. I laid my backpack down, curled into a corner, and tried to sleep. I didn't cry, not yet, because I was too numb to feel anything except exhaustion the next morning. I walked to the public library, one of the few places I knew that wouldn't kick me out for staying too long. I used the computer there to search for shelters for jobs, for anything, but most places were full or had long waiting lists. I tried calling a few old classmates, people I wasn't even close with, just to ask if I could crash for a night or two. 3 of them didn't pick up. One said their parents wouldn't allow it. Another said they'd check and never called back by day 3. I had eaten a granola bar and a bottle of water. My stomach ached, but worse than that was the heaviness in my chest, the growing fear that no one was coming to save me. I went to the gym where I used to have a student trial membership, told the front desk I had lost my key card, and they let me in out of habit. I showered quickly, trying not to cry as I washed my hair, wondering how long I could keep sneaking in before someone noticed I spent the next few nights rotating between empty buildings, stairwells, and once a small tent someone had discarded behind the high school stadium. I didn't sleep well, always on alert, always half dreaming of footsteps or voices or hands reaching through the dark. I carried my backpack everywhere, afraid to leave it behind. It held everything I had left, including a small notebook where I started writing, not poetry or dreams, just facts, names of people I had tried to call places that had turned me away. Things I had learned, like which fast food spots had free water and which ones would let you sit without buying anything. A week passed and I felt like I was becoming invisible, like the world had shifted and I had slipped through a crack no one else could see. I remember sitting in the corner of the library one afternoon, starving and shaking, when a woman about 60 sat down next to me. She had seen me there 3 days in a row and asked if I was okay. I nodded, but I guess my face gave me away. She reached into her purse and handed me a banana and a peanut butter sandwich. I cried the moment she walked away quietly with my head down, because it had been a week since anyone had done something kind without wanting something in return. I wrote her name in my notebook too, not her full name. I never got it, just library lady. I stayed in that town for another 3 weeks doing odd jobs. I found on Craigslist pet sitting lawn work, anything that paid in cash. I used that money to rent a storage unit, the cheapest one they had, barely wide enough for me to stretch out in, but it had a roof and a door that locked, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a place. I laid out a folded blanket on the floor, kept a flashlight and a bottle of water nearby, and started building routines, mornings at the library, afternoons, looking for work, evenings back in the unit with my notebook, writing down everything. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and in some strange, broken way, I was surviving. Every morning I woke up sore from the concrete floor of that storage unit, my back aching, my arms stiff, but I kept going. I kept telling myself that if I could just make it through one more day, maybe something would shift. Maybe life would finally throw me something other than survival. And eventually, it did. It started at the public library, the place that had become more of a home than anywhere I'd known. I was sitting at the far computer scrolling through job listings, most of them requiring degrees I didn't have or references I couldn't give when I noticed an elderly woman struggling to use the printer. Her hands were shaking slightly, the machine kept jamming, and after a few failed attempts, she sighed and stepped back in frustration. I stood up and offered to help. Cleared the paper jam, restarted the job, and handed her the printed forms. She smiled at me, a warm kind of smile. Not pitying, just kind, and asked if I worked there. I shook my head and told her I just knew the system well because I came often. We talked for a few minutes, mostly small talk, until she mentioned she worked part-time at a small accounting office a few blocks away. Said they were drowning in paperwork and needed someone to help with data entry. I didn't hesitate, told her I'd do it any hours, any rate. She said she'd ask her boss, and 2 days later, I walked into a beige office with mismatched chairs and piles of receipts everywhere, and started my first official job since losing everything. The pay was low, barely above minimum wage, but they paid cash. Didn't ask too many questions and let me work as many hours as I wanted. I threw myself into it, showing up early, staying late, learning as much as I could about invoices, spreadsheets, filing systems, and slowly I started to rebuild my confidence. Not because the work was glamorous, but because for the first time in weeks, I felt useful. I used my first full paycheck to buy new socks and a prepaid cell phone. The next one went toward food that wasn't just granola bars or crackers. I kept living in the storage unit, but it started to feel less like hiding and more like regrouping. I was still exhausted, still cautious, but the desperation began to fade. Replaced by a steady determination. Around that time, I discovered free online courses. I spent hours after work watching videos about budgeting, digital literacy, and eventually financial technology. The more I learned, the more obsessed I became with the idea that money wasn't just survival, it was control, power, safety. I started dreaming again, not about mansions or luxury, just about never feeling that helpless again. One night while scrolling through a forum on freelance gigs, I saw a post from a small business owner who needed help organizing receipts and building a budget plan. I responded. Offering a low flat rate and a 2-day turnaround, they agreed. I did the work using free spreadsheet tools delivered early, and they sent a bonus with a thank you note. That moment felt bigger than a paycheck. It felt like possibility. I began building a portfolio offering budget setups and digital organizing to more small businesses. Sometimes it paid nothing, sometimes $20, but each gig taught me something new. I saved every penny cutting corners where I could never spending on anything unnecessary. After 5 months, I had enough to rent a shared room in a rundown house with 2 other girls. One of them was loud and messy, the other never said a word, but it was 4 walls, a door, a bed. I cried the first night I slept there, not because I missed the storage unit, but because I finally felt a sliver of stability from there. Things began to accelerate. I landed a longer-term client, a startup in Denver, that needed ongoing help managing their project budgets. They couldn't pay much at first, but they introduced me to other founders, and within a year, I had enough clients to quit the accounting office and freelance full-time. It wasn't easy. Some months were tight, others were feast or famine. But I never went hungry again, and more importantly, I was finally building something on my own terms. I started a small website, wrote articles about financial survival, shared tips I had learned the hard way. I didn't think anyone was reading, but one post went viral, a thread about budgeting while homeless got picked up by a financial blog, then shared on Twitter within a week. I had over 1,000 subscribers and 3 new clients. I wasn't rich, not yet, but for the first time in years, I could breathe without fear, and that changed everything. Success didn't arrive in a single dramatic moment. It came slowly, like sunlight creeping through thick blinds at 22. I was freelancing full-time, managing budgets, building spreadsheets, offering financial clarity to small businesses that had no idea what they were doing. I learned how to speak their language, how to simplify the mess they'd avoided for years, and they started recommending me first to friends, then to partners, then to entire networks. I raised my rates cautiously, afraid to scare people off, but no one flinched. They paid because I delivered. I showed up early. I asked smart questions. I kept every promise. One client mailed me a handwritten note that said, "You're the only reason we survived this quarter." I kept that note taped above my desk for years. It reminded me that my worth wasn't in being agreeable or invisible. It was in being dependable, resourceful. Sharp, when I turned 24, I decided to formalize everything. I filed an LLC under the name Harper Solutions, built a proper website, hired a designer to clean up my branding, and started calling myself a financial systems consultant. It sounded fancier than what I was doing, but it made people listen. I started offering workshops first online, then in person, teaching freelancers and young entrepreneurs how to build systems that wouldn't collapse, how to understand cash flow, how to avoid debt traps. The demand grew faster than I expected. I was invited to speak on small business panels featured in a podcast about women in fintech. My audience grew slowly but steadily. I was no longer surviving. I was building, and that feeling was addictive by 25. I had saved enough to move into a one-bedroom apartment in Denver, my name on the lease, my furniture paid in full. No roommates, no shared fridge, just space that was mine. I painted the walls, soft gray, bought a plant I named May. Set up a desk by the window. I worked 12-hour days sometimes, but I didn't mind because it wasn't just work. It was proof that I could carve out something real from the ruins they left me in. I got health insurance for the first time, opened a retirement account, hired a part-time virtual assistant named Camilla who helped me stay on top of client emails and invoicing. It felt strange at first, delegating trusting someone else with even a sliver of what I'd built, but Camilla was sharp and kind, and she reminded me that leadership wasn't about control. It was about clarity. I started sleeping better, dreaming bigger. By 27, I had 5 contractors under me, specialists in bookkeeping, analytics, automation. We didn't have an office yet, just Slack and Zoom and shared folders, but we were effective and, more importantly, we were profitable. Our clients returned, referred. Others wrote testimonials that brought in strangers who turned into partners. The money came in waves enough to pay everyone well, enough to reinvest, enough to never again check my bank balance and panic the first time I saw my account cross 7 figures. I stared at the screen for a full minute, not smiling, not crying, just breathing slowly, as if I finally believed I was safe. Not lucky, not rescued, just safe, because I had built this with my own hands. My own brain. No one could take that from me. I thought of the storage unit of the nights I went to bed with a flashlight and a stomachache, and I felt this quiet kind of pride, not flashy, not loud, just deep and steady. I didn't post about it, didn't throw a party. I ordered takeout, watched a movie alone, then woke up the next day and kept going because I had more to build, more to prove not to them but to myself. The people who did matter in my life started to grow too. Clients who turned into friends, mentors who shared their mistakes. Camila, who eventually moved to Denver and became my operations manager. I created routines that grounded me. Therapy on Tuesdays, meal prep on Sundays, gym visits. When I remembered I wasn't trying to be perfect, just whole, and for the first time I felt like I was getting there. I was 30 when I received the email. It came from a Gmail address. I didn't recognize the subject line. Read just one word. Claire. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. I hadn't heard from my sister in over a decade, not since that final text she sent me the day I found the house empty. I hovered my mouse for a long moment, then clicked. The email was short, almost too casual. Hey, Alyssa. Mom saw a video of you speaking on financial literacy. We're all really proud. I think it's amazing what you've done. She'd love to reconnect if you're open to it. So, would I hope to hear from you soon? Claire. I stared at it, reread it, then closed my laptop and walked away the next morning. It was still there, unchanged, like a ghost waiting to be acknowledged. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I had too much memories flooded back in pieces. The silence at dinner, the way she used to laugh when I cried, the way she stood next to Mom the day they vanished from my life without even a goodbye. I tried to shake it off, focus on work on my clients, but a week later another message arrived, this time from a courier service. A letter had been delivered to my office address, handwritten, no return name. Just my name in familiar looping cursive. I opened it slowly. The paper smelled faintly of rose lotion. The kind my mother used to wear inside were 2 pages, the first full of words. I didn't trust. We made mistakes. Things were hard. We thought you'd be okay. You always were, the strong one. We didn't know how to reach you. The second page said something else entirely. Lily is graduating this spring. She's Claire's daughter. She wants to meet her aunt. She's never stopped asking about you. Maybe we can all sit down and talk. Just talk. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope, unsure what emotion I was supposed to feel. Grief, rage, curiosity. Something about the mention of Lily stuck with me. I had never met her, never even seen a photo. She would be, 17 now, the same age I was when they left. I brought the letter to therapy that week. My therapist Samantha read it silently, then looked up and said, "You don't have to decide anything now. This doesn't need a reaction, just reflection." I nodded but couldn't shake the ache that settled behind my ribs later that night. I dug out my old notebook, the one from my storage unit days, the one with names and notes and facts. I flipped to the pages where I had written about Claire, about my parents, about the way it felt to be erased. I remembered how clear it had all been back then, how determined I was to never let them back in. But time is strange, it softens. What shouldn't be soft and stirs what you thought was buried 2 weeks later. I sent Claire a single-line email. Why now, she replied within the hour. Said she'd been following my company quietly. Said, the video triggered something in Mom, something about seeing me speak with confidence, with poise. She said it made them realize how badly they'd messed up, that they didn't know how to face me before. But they were trying. Now, I asked her one more question. What did you think would happen? She replied, honestly, I didn't think you'd ever want to talk to us again. But Lily insisted she wanted to know where her aunt was. She looked you up, found the company, saw your face, and asked Mom why no one had told her you existed. I didn't know what to say to that. The idea that they had erased me, not just from their lives, but from Lily's too, made something old and sharp twist inside me. I went quiet for a few days, then sent another email. Tell me the truth. Claire, all of it. No filters, no stories. Why did you leave me? Why didn't anyone come back? The reply came the next morning, longer this time and more detailed. She admitted they were broke, deep in debt, behind on rent and bills. Dad had gambling problems. Mom had maxed out credit cards. They were afraid of legal trouble. And Claire said they made a decision to downsize, but it was more than that, she wrote. The truth is, they thought you'd be okay. They always saw you as too smart, too independent, like you didn't need anyone. They convinced themselves you'd figure it out, that social services would help, that maybe a friend would take you in, and I believed them. I was scared and selfish, and I let them decide for me. I'm sorry, Alyssa. I really am. I didn't know what to do with that. It wasn't an excuse, but it was a crack in the wall. I showed the emails to Samantha. She reminded me again that reflection was not obligation, that understanding did not require reconciliation, but something in me had shifted. Not in forgiveness, not yet, but in curiosity. I wanted to see Lily's face. I wanted to ask her what they told her. I wanted to know what version of me they had invented to justify what they did. 2 weeks later, I received another letter. This one arrived directly at my apartment, slipped under the door in a plain white envelope. I never gave them my home address, so someone must have gone looking. I opened it cautiously. Inside were 3 photographs. The first was of Lily standing in a cap and gown, holding a diploma with a smile that looked almost familiar. The second was of me as a child, about 5, sitting on a swing. The third was a picture I didn't recognize, a woman I didn't know holding a baby. The handwriting on the back read, Claire, Mom and Alyssa, 1991. My chest tightened. The dates didn't make sense. I was born in 1994, not 1991, and I had never seen this woman before. I called Samantha, told her everything. She listened quietly, then asked a simple question. Do you want to know what this means? I did desperately, so I started digging. I requested my birth certificate from the county clerk's office. I paid extra for a rush delivery, and when it arrived, my hands shook as I opened it. The father's name was listed as unknown. My mother's name matched, but the hospital listed was in Kansas, not Missouri. I had never lived in Kansas, never even visited. I called the hospital and asked for any available records. They said there was no release without legal proof of identity. I sent what I had waited 4 more days and then received a scanned document via email, a birth record showing my name, but the mother listed was not Margaret Harper. The name was Ann Whitaker. I sat on the floor and stared at the screen, trying to piece it together. I called the hospital again, confirmed the document, then searched for Ann Whitaker online. A few results came up: obituaries, old high school yearbooks, one. Photo matched the woman in the picture I had received. I kept digging until I found a court record from 1995 custody transfer. Ann Whitaker to Margaret and Daniel Harper. I printed everything, laid it out on my dining table, and stared at the truth, my truth. I was adopted. They had never told me, never hinted, never even left a clue, and when things got hard, when the money dried up and the guilt kicked in, I was the one they chose to leave behind. Not because I was strong, but because I wasn't really theirs. Not in the way Claire was. Not in the way that mattered when survival became selfish. I felt cold all over, a strange kind of betrayal that rewrote my whole childhood in seconds. I thought of every time my mother brushed my hair without affection, every time my father ignored my questions, every time Claire told me I was too sensitive, too different. Maybe I was. Maybe because I didn't share their blood. They never really felt like I belonged. I brought the documents to therapy, spread them out on the couch like shattered glass. Samantha said, "Something I didn't expect. This doesn't change who you are, it changes what they did." That distinction mattered more than I realized. I wasn't broken because I was adopted. I was broken because the people entrusted with raising me decided I was disposable. A week later, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, then played it with trembling hands. It was Claire. Her voice was quiet, raw. She said she needed to tell me something in person, that there was more I didn't know. I agreed to meet. Not because I trusted her, but because the missing pieces were eating away at me. We met at a small park near my apartment, neutral ground, public safe. She looked older, thinner, her hair darker, her smile hesitant. She hugged me, and I let her arms stiff at my sides. Then we sat on a bench, and she told me the rest she had known since she was 10, that I wasn't her biological sister. She overheard an argument between Mom and Dad, something about payments, about Anne changing her mind, but they never talked about it again. When I was older, Claire said she started to notice things, how Mom treated me colder, how Dad ignored me more, and how every decision they made about me felt like an afterthought. Then came the financial collapse. Dad's debts, Mom's shame, and one night they decided to leave. They told Claire they could only take who they could afford, that I was smart, that I'd manage, and Claire didn't fight them. She cried as she told me this, said she had been living with guilt ever since I listened. Not out of forgiveness, but out of disbelief. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had calculated it, chosen it, justified it. Claire reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. Inside were printouts, old emails, Facebook posts from Mom claiming I had run away, that I was mentally unstable, that I had stolen from them, pleas for prayers, requests for donations to help them find their lost daughter. All lies, all public, all shared with family and friends, and anyone who might have asked too many questions. They had rewritten history while I lived in silence, while I rebuilt myself from nothing. Claire said she didn't know they had gone that far, that when Lily found the posts and asked why her aunt had disappeared, Claire finally demanded the truth, finally forced them to admit it, and now they were desperate not just for money, but for reputation, because people were asking questions, because my face was suddenly on screens, on stages, on articles, because the truth was catching up to them and they wanted to control it before it destroyed them. I left the park with that folder pressed against my chest like a wound, walked straight home without speaking, without thinking. I spread the documents out on my table again, stared at them. The lies, the manipulation, the careful construction of a story in which I was the villain and they were the grieving parents. I felt fury, but not the loud kind, not the screaming kind. This was colder, sharper, the kind that brings clarity. I called Marcus, my attorney, not just for my business, but the one who helped me draft contracts and navigate partnership disputes. I told him everything, sent the files, the emails, the photos, every screenshot. He called back an hour later and said we needed to act fast, not out of panic, but control. He said, if they were starting to spin narratives, we needed to establish the truth before they turned this into something uglier. I trusted Marcus because he never dramatized. Just calculated he drafted a cease and desist order first, sent it to both Margaret and Daniel Harper via certified mail, forbidding them from using my name, likeness, or business identity in any public capacity. He followed it with a formal legal warning that any further misrepresentation would result in a defamation suit. Then we moved quietly. Strategically, Marcus reached out to a journalist. We knew someone who had interviewed me months before for a piece on financial resilience. We offered exclusive access to the real story proof of abandonment adoption documents. The manipulation trail, all redacted to protect minors and irrelevant third parties. The article published 3 days later under the title, From Forgotten to Founder, How One Woman Rebuilt Her Life After Being Erased. It went viral within 24 hours. Not because it was sensational, but because it was true, raw and full of verifiable facts. I didn't name my family, explicitly didn't need to. The story stood on its own the same day the article dropped. I received an email from an old high school teacher who said she had always wondered what happened to me. A former classmate sent a message saying she never believed the rumors that she was sorry for not reaching out. Support poured in. Not pity, not charity, just recognition. Quiet validation that I hadn't imagined the pain, the silence, the years of being invisible, and then came the final move. Marcus filed a notice of legal protection under my business entity, listing my personal identity and likeness as brand assets, which meant any use or misrepresentation by outside parties could be prosecuted under both civil and business law. He also suggested we file a formal privacy claim to prevent any attempts to contact clients, vendors, or team members under false pretenses. I agreed. Every piece of paper we filed, every call we made felt like a brick in the wall. I was finally allowed to build between me and them, not out of fear, but authority. I didn't want revenge. I wanted silence, boundaries, peace. I wanted them to know that their access was permanently revoked, that whatever leverage they thought they had was gone. I didn't reply to the texts Claire sent after the article. The ones that said they didn't mean for it to get this far, that Mom was distraught that Dad was threatening to sue. I blocked her number, forwarded the messages to Marcus, and went back to work because I had deadlines, a team to support clients, to guide, and no room left in my life for ghosts pretending they wanted redemption when all they really wanted was control. 3 weeks after the article went live, I received a handwritten note slid under the door of my office. There was no envelope. Just my name at the top in my mother's familiar handwriting and 2 lines beneath it. One sentence asking to meet the other, giving a time and place. The corner cafe near the old park downtown Saturday at noon. I stared at it for a long time, torn between curiosity and nausea. I brought it to therapy, to Marcus, to myself at 2 in the morning when I couldn't sleep. Everyone said the same thing. You don't owe them anything. You don't have to go, and they were right, but something inside me needed to see them one last time. Not to forgive, not to understand, but to make it real, to close the chapter with words that belonged to me, not to their version of me. So I went. I wore black slacks, a fitted blazer, hair pulled back clean, not to impress, but to feel solid. I arrived 10 minutes early, ordered a coffee. I wouldn't drink, and sat in the back corner where I could see the door but not be seen from the street. At exactly noon, they walked in, Margaret and Daniel Harper, older, smaller than I remembered. Time had carved new lines into their faces, but their posture was the same, guarded and tight. They scanned the room and spotted me. Margaret smiled, tentative, hopeful. Daniel nodded once like this was some kind of business negotiation. They sat down without asking, the air between us, thick with things none of us wanted to be the first to say. I let the silence stretch. Then, finally, I spoke. I said, I'm not here to forgive. I'm not here to give you money or closure or comfort. I'm here to tell you one thing and one thing only. It's over. You lost not just the story or the chance to reclaim it, but me. You lost the right to know who I am now, what I've built, who I've become. Margaret reached for my hand across the table. I didn't move, she said. We made mistakes. We see that now. We were scared and overwhelmed. We thought we were doing what was best. Daniel cleared his throat. Said we had no choice. The debts. The legal threats we were drowning. Alyssa, you don't know what it was like. I looked him straight in the eye and said, You're right, I don't, because when I was drowning, you were the ones holding me under Margaret's face. Crumpled, she started to cry. Said she was sorry that she wanted a second chance. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, placed it on the table without opening it. Inside are copies of every legal notice Marcus has sent, every documented instance of slander, every violation of my personal privacy. I said, if I see my name or my business mentioned again in any context related to you, we will sue, and not privately, not quietly. We will do it in court in public with every document on the record. You won't just lose this battle, you'll lose every shred of reputation you're trying to claw back. Daniel's face darkened, said, You think you're better than us. Now, you think your money makes you untouchable. I laughed once, low and sharp. I said no. I think my survival makes me unbreakable. You tried to erase me, you failed, and now you're scared of what I've become. Margaret reached again, said, Please, we just want our daughter back. I shook my head slowly. You never wanted a daughter. You wanted a quiet shadow who didn't ask questions, who didn't take up space. And when I refused to stay small, you left. Now you're here because I became someone without you, and that terrifies you, but it doesn't concern me not anymore. I stood, left the folder on the table, and said, This is the last time you'll ever see me. You had your chance over and over again, and you used it to lie, to abandon, to manipulate. I don't hate you, I feel nothing for you, and that's the most peace I've ever had. As I walked away, I heard Margaret call my name soft, desperate, like if she said it just right, it would pull me back. But I didn't turn around, didn't flinch, just kept walking out of the cafe, out of the past, out of their reach for good. I didn't go home right away after the cafe. I walked for nearly an hour through the city, letting the noise and motion blur around me, letting the adrenaline drain from my hands until I could breathe again. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt calm, almost eerily so, like I had just finished reading the last page of a book I'd carried for too long. I went back to my apartment, locked the door behind me, and stood in the center of the living room, this space I had built on my own terms, with walls that held no ghosts and furniture, chosen only by me. I took off my blazer, kicked off my shoes, and let out the deepest breath I had ever taken. I called Marcus to let him know it was done, told him what I said, what they said. He paused for a long moment, then said, I'm proud of you. That hit harder than I expected. Not because I needed the praise, but because no one had ever said those words to me when I needed them most. I sat on the couch that night, lit one candle, and wrote a letter. Not to them, not to anyone, just to myself. I wrote about the girl in the storage unit, the one who kept receipts in a shoebox and slept with a flashlight under her pillow. I told her she made it, that she was right to keep going, that she was right to trust herself even when no one else did. I folded the letter and slipped it into the back of my notebook, the same one I carried all those years ago. The next morning, I went back to work, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I had a team that relied on me, clients who trusted me, a mission bigger than proving people wrong, a mission built on teaching others that survival was just the first step, that building something lasting, something stable, something dignified was possible. Even after betrayal, months passed and there were no more emails, no letters, no unexpected appearances. They were gone, really gone, and I didn't miss them. I didn't wonder. I didn't wait. I kept living. Lily reached out once. A quiet message through a mutual contact. She said she understood if I didn't want to talk, but that she had questions and no one else was giving her real answers. She said she'd seen the article, seen my face, and felt something she couldn't explain. I didn't reply right away. I thought about it for weeks, then finally sent a short message. I'm not ready to talk, but I'm glad you're asking questions. She wrote back, just one word, thank you, and we left it at that. No pressure, no promises, just space. And I realized that was enough for now, enough to break the cycle, enough to give her what I never had, a sliver of truth. I kept going. kept building my company grew, not just in revenue, but in purpose. We launched a mentorship program, funded financial literacy workshops for underfunded schools, partnered with nonprofits, helping women escape financial abuse. I found meaning in the structure, in the spreadsheets, in the systems, but more than that, I found meaning in the people who had once stood where I stood, shaking hungry and uncertain every time someone told me that my story helped them feel less alone. I felt like I was stitching myself back together, thread by thread, stronger than before, not healed all the way, but whole enough to keep walking, and that was all I had ever needed. I still go to therapy, still flinch sometimes when the doorbell rings unexpectedly, still get quiet when someone brings up family at dinner. But I don't carry shame anymore. I don't carry blame, I carry choice. The choice to protect my peace. The choice to define family on my own terms. The choice to write new stories from the ashes of the old. And if there's one thing I've learned, one thing I would tell anyone listening, it's this. Your past does not entitle anyone to your present pain, does not excuse cruelty. And healing is not about letting people back in. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself they tried to erase. I'm not the girl they left behind anymore. I'm the woman who kept going, who chose truth over silence, and who built a life too solid to be shaken by the ghosts of people who chose to disappear.